Today on Safest Family on the Block, we're having a conversation with a man who spent his first career in the Special Forces and his second career in education. He shares with us his thoughts on keeping kids safe at school. Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you see, please do hit the subscribe button and the like button. It helps more than you know. If you love this, please tell a friend, find us on Facebook, or back our efforts on Patreon. Thank you again. Now let's get after it. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason Brick, and with me today is George Brick. Hello, George.
Hello, Jason. How are you?
Doing really well. Now, often when you say two people with the same last name, the next thing you say is no relation. In this case, he is my uncle, my dad's brother, and he's coming to us from a wealth of experience. George joined the United States Marine Corps in 1966 and served in a number of capacities until his retirement from active duty in 1992. And at that point, he transitioned into school administration, where he served as the principal in charter schools, private schools, and public schools, as well as the dean of students at New Mexico Military Institute. And that combination of careers puts George in a position to know more and have more interesting insights into school safety and student safety than anybody I've encountered. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So thank you so much for taking the time to come out. I know you're...
Well, thank you, Jason. I want to, in case anyone I know would ever watch this, I need to correct that I was the vice dean of academics.
Oh, okay.
And the high school of the principal. Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't want them to think that I was trying to take a position, theirs that they still have.
The vice dean of students at NMMI.
Yeah.
And so, George, I think the first question I'd like to ask is about misconceptions. Parents have some ideas about the things that their kids, the dangers their kids might face at school. And I think most of the time they think about bullies and they think about stranger danger. But there's a lot of other risks at school. And could you talk a little bit about what you think parents think they know that they don't know?
Probably preface anything I would say by mentioning that virtually all schools have enough rules to run a convent. There are plenty of rules. Are they being followed? And those kinds of things, of course, are another question. And I think that the thing that trumps everything is the attention of the teachers and administrators at a school. They have to be paying attention to what's going on around them. And parents have to recognize, and do of course recognize, that most of the time when a student is hurt or has some kind of an injury at school, I believe it comes from another student, not maliciously, but they bump heads, they mash their fingers indoors, they trip over things and fall and skin their knees. And I think most of those little injuries are just part of life. But still, parents need to know that the adults at the school are paying attention and watching out for these things. There are all kinds of rules about what students can do and can't do, and about what you must do with all of the receptacles to plug in electronic devices and all of the doors and all of those kinds of things. But are the adults watching and keeping a continual vigil on what's going on around them, and never taking their eyes off of the students, and always counting. One of the things when I was a classroom teacher that I continually did was counted noses. I needed to make sure that everyone who was in my supposed to be in my class was there. So those are the just vigilance with an eye towards safety.
And are there ways that a parent can, so you can't be in the school keeping an eye out every day, are there some signs that you've noticed, maybe as in your supervisory role, where you can tell that a teacher's not on the ball, not as vigilant as they should be? Are there some warning signs we can keep an eye out for?
Well, I don't know that there are warning signs that a parent can keep an eye out for, but all teachers and administrators need to be helping one another. When you're outside on playground duty, it's not a time to be for the 2 or 3 teachers to be gathered around visiting about something. They need to be reminding one another that we need to be watching students. And the best way to remind someone that they should be watching students instead of talking to you is by you yourself turning away and watching students. I always found that to be the most effective thing, especially with the younger ones. There is no end to the things they could do to hurt themselves. You know, not always terribly, but in some cases they can be serious injuries. Adults need to be watching out and presuming that if things can go wrong, they will. If he could hurt himself doing that, he will.
So it sounds like perhaps if I'm coming to the school to pick up my child, for example, and routinely the teachers at the bus ramp are clustered together gossiping, that's a situation I might want to mention to the principal. Whereas if they're spread out in a way and watching all the visible areas and their focus is clearly on the children, that might be an example of a way that as a parent I could find out how safe the school might be.
Well, I don't know if you could find out how safe the school might be, Jason, but it would certainly be something to pay attention to. It would be an indicator that maybe there needs to be a little more administrative supervision during that period of time, because that one period of time that you just mentioned when everyone's arriving, that is an important time, and it is fraught with danger.
So one point of data among many would maybe be a better way to put that, I guess, than it indicating the whole school's out of whack. But okay.
Yeah.
So
yes,
so you mentioned the bus ramp at release time and entry time being particularly dangerous. Are there other times of day that are
during the lunch period? Because well, I believe that accountability, knowing where your students are and what they're doing during the entire school day is really important. And those things get skewed a little bit when everyone goes off to lunch and someone else is supervising them for a certain period of time. And they're mingling with other students that they are not usually mingling with at that level during the daytime, and you're not there. So those are important times. And often schools have arrangements where parents or guardians can come in and observe during the lunch period, or even join for lunch. And it's good to be able to do things like that, because it gives you a different sense of what's actually going on there. And I think teachers are always trying to do the right thing, but you need to know to what level it's taken seriously.
and to the degree that they're permitted to. I know that a lot of teachers have 110 or 120% of a reasonable human load on them at all times. So it feels like when that vigilance does slip, I think it's important, as you say, to not start blaming teachers like is so common in some parts of society, but to remember that they've got a big load. And if we can come volunteer at the schools, whether it's at lunchtime or in the classroom, that's a way to both support the teachers while keeping an eagle eye and making sure that they're helping keep our kids safe.
Yes, I'm absolutely. There are certain transition times that take place all during the day, from K all the way up through 12th grade, and the same thing is true really at the college level, that get things out of order a little bit, and the adults might have a little bit more trouble being able to manage those periods of time. And adults, one of your questions was, what are some things that parents could do? And I would say, get involved with your school. There are ways, possibly through a parent league or a parent-teacher organization. They might want bus or playground monitors. There are a number of ways to get involved that really take very little of a parent's time, but they're important to the school. But I think they're also important to the parent, because it gives you a sort of an idea of the ambiance of the school and how people treat one another and those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And schools across the country are desperate for volunteers. I
Yeah,
haven't found a school yet
yeah,
that
they
turns one
are.
away. Yeah,
They are.
my wife and I ended up coaching the chess team at our school because I asked the principal if they had a chess team, and he said no. And I asked why, and he looked me in the eye and said, because we don't have a parent volunteer to teach it yet. And just maintained eye
Well, aren't you
contact
glad?
until I ended up coaching the chess team. And
Well, aren't
those
you glad
opportunities.
you didn't ask if they had a skydiving team?
Yes, I am. But those opportunities, I think, there are more opportunities for that than I think most parents realize. Of course, there are the realities of many parents that are at work at that time. But
Mhm.
as you say, the more we get involved, the better we are. Now,
Yes, I think so. And you learn a lot from other parents at
mhm,
parent-teacher organizations. And I was also, well, I still am, uh, uh, certified to go to schools and do a accreditation visit.
mhm,
And when you walk into a school uh, as a visitor, you can within just in less than a half hour, you can know how the school is doing just by watching the students, seeing how they treat one another, seeing how they interact with the teachers and administrators, and those kinds of things, those kinds of observation go a long way in telling you whether you're at a safe school.
and what are some of the things that if you walked into a school and you saw would be other data points that would suggest that maybe this school isn't as safe as it could be?
If a student was afraid of me, uh, if students treated one another harshly, if they were afraid of their teachers, if uh, if the teachers spoke disrespectfully, even the second and third grades, those things go a long ways uh, towards help everyone else, teachers, students, parents, everyone, make sure that things are safe.
Mhm. So, now, from the outside, as a parent, if I'm concerned about safety at a school, I feel like we can talk to the administration, of course, but we can also talk to our children. What are some things that you might recommend that we talk to our kids about, or questions we might ask our kids about safety in the school that could help us be better informed and help prepare our kids to be safe?
Well, I think first of all, you should listen to your children. Uh, if you ask them every day, "Are you safe? Do you feel safe?" Eventually, they're going to say, "No, I'm not. I'm not safe." Uh, you need to just be listening to their conversations with their friends. You need to be looking at the things that they're drawing and making and those kinds of things, because students, when they don't feel safe and there's something that's very troubling to them, and and, and they don't have the social skills or the emotional skills to really open up about them, they will indicate in some way that everything is not the way it should be. And I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong, and you just need to be paying attention.
Sounds like adults paying attention to the kids is kind of the theme of this conversation, that
Well, I
teachers,
think it
parents
is.
should all wait.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and and the adults are, as you said, the teachers, the parents, the substitute teachers, the administrators, the guy who sweeps the hall, the bus drivers. You see, there are a number of people who are involved in your student's life. And then if you don't drive them to the door of the school every day, then that greatly increases the number of people who who could potentially have contact with your child. So all those things need to be thought about.
Now, if I'm concerned about how much that's being thought of by the administration, I'm sure there's a right way and a wrong way to go about encouraging the administration to address those concerns. Could you talk about that a little
Well,
bit?
Yeah, there is a right and a wrong way to do those things, and I would I would say that the way to get started is to know your teacher, your students' teachers. And some teachers will say, if you have any questions or if there's anything that you need to know about what's going on in this class, or if there's any trouble with the academic work, please contact me and here's my email. A lot of teachers have that kind of a relationship with the parents. That's not always the case, but I think it most often is. And if it isn't, it should be. But then you can always speak with the principal too, because the principal should know what's going on in all of the classrooms with all of the students. And of course, he or she might not know exactly with every individual case, but administrators, principals do have ways of finding out, and they should be doing that. When I was in my role as a principal at New Mexico Military, a parent would call. My person that worked in the office would put them on hold, and I would bring up their grades and their deportment and their medical condition. I had two computer screens in front of me, and I would have it all right there instantly, and then I would be able to have an intelligent conversation with the parent. But
If I do come across administration that maybe doesn't feel that way, that they're focused on the rules, or maybe unfortunately in some cases focused on their own career, their own convenience or inconvenience, what are the kinds of things I could do to have a productive, useful conversation with an adult who's not paying enough attention to my child to keep them safe?
well, there's always a school board, and parents can go to school boards and bring those things up with the school board, and the school board or governing authority, whatever that may be, they'll know if you go to the school board with trouble with a certain teacher, and they don't understand what could possibly be going wrong with that particular teacher. Well, that's probably correct. But remember, they get contacted by the parents of all the students who feel there need to be some sort of contact. So things can often get resolved that way. Another thing, and this brings up another issue, of course, but school choice. If parents could choose what school to send their student to, that would go a long way, I think, toward correcting that kind of issue. Generally speaking, though, Jason, I think that parents are often very pleased with the administrators and the teachers that their students have.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, that's been my experience with our elementary school here, although mileage may vary. And I think it's good for parents to feel empowered to speak to whoever can give them the answers they need. I did really appreciate your point, though, that the school board's dealing with communication about teachers every day. So if you go to the school board about a teacher who is problematic, the school board is going to go, "Oh yeah, that guy." Whereas if the school board is, yeah, where if they respond with, "We've never heard about a problem with this teacher," they're the ones who would have heard a lot of the time.
Yes, I think so. But that would always be a very serious matter, because the administrator should be able to take care of those issues. And if they can't be taken care of or aren't taken care of, my own personal belief, and I know that I'm out of line with educators on this, is that you ought to be able to just get up and move to a different school.
That's becoming more and more common in our part of the world, in the Portland metro area. There's a lot of they call them magnet schools at the high school level, where you can shift from school to school if there's an issue. But yeah, that idea of having them in competition certainly I don't think would hurt much.
Yes, there is a certain amount of competition to it, but it's also correct, I think, to notice that some students belong at certain schools with certain emphases and a certain clientele and those sorts of things. One size does not fit all.
Absolutely true. And I think that again gets back to it, vigilance and knowing your child and knowing the school and knowing their teacher and paying attention to the individual details, not trying to assign one set of rules to everybody.
Yes, the issues that go on with schools, it's not the shootings and the kidnappings and the fires and those kinds of things, not at all. It's just the daily interaction of the most precious thing in your life, which is your child, with others over whom you really don't have very much control. So I think it's really important to have to do everything you can do to strengthen the relationship you have with those who spend almost as much, well, who spend all day with your child. So I think that's something that every parent ought to think about.
Get into the school however we can, even if it's just if you're working 9 to 5 and the kid's in school the entire time you're there and you can't go, there's email, there's parent teacher nights, anything we can do to communicate and keep those lines of communication open.
Yes, and many of the, especially now with schools going to different forms of online education, you can know what the assignment was every day, whether it was turned in, what the grade was, and in some cases you can even look at the corrected paper. So that can be very helpful.
Absolutely. And I think that when everything goes back to normal, if it ever does, I think we'll see some of these things that we've learned about distance learning, about parent-teacher communications. I think some of those things will stay. I think we'll have a more transparent, more communicative education system than we did before all of this, because some of these things are very good.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Everything will get back to normal, but we don't know what normal is just yet. And whatever it becomes, parents will have knowledge about some things that they just didn't know about very much before.
And knowledge is generally a good thing. It's better than not having. Now, you mentioned some things that are more discrepant events, and that's the big issues. As you say, the day-to-day situation at school, we're going to be dealing with bullying, maybe accidental injury, kid running on the playground when he's an inch taller than he was last time, so now he hits the monkey bar where last week he didn't, that sort of thing. But every once in a while, we do have school shootings, we have fires, natural catastrophes, abduction attempts. These are very rare. But how prepared do you think most schools are to realistically deal with those?
Well, that especially is an area where schools have lots of rules and procedures with how they're going to deal with those kinds of things. The question is, do they ever rehearse them? They must be rehearsed. And if your plan is not rehearsed, you don't have a plan. I've seen this was so apparent at New Mexico Military Institute, being a military school and having the school, every student in a certain unit at a certain level of supervision. We were able to do a very good job of that, but every school doesn't have that luxury. So these fire drills, for example, are practiced continually. Now, when the last time there was a fire in a school in the United States was, I don't know, but I don't think I ever remember hearing about one. But we do religiously practice those fire drills. It's the other things that I think schools don't practice as much as they should, because they say that, well, this will cause students, it'll cause them fear. It will upset them if we practice. Well, that's a, I'm not so sure about that. Your little primary students possibly, but it's certainly important that there's a plan that has been rehearsed, so that you can know what the problems are with actually implementing your plan. It's absolutely essential, and I hope it's being done at the level that it should be done.
And would you recommend also doing some practicing and drilling as parents? One of the places I know in this district that's frustrated me, we don't have natural catastrophes, but every couple of years the snow hits in the middle of the day, and because this is the Pacific Northwest, everybody panics because the sky is falling, and they close school in the middle of the day. And the communication about that is always an enormous Charlie Foxtrot. That
Well, yeah, that that's something that has to be taken care of. Schools should also, we call that an alpha roster. Schools should also see whether, whatever their procedure is, to contact every single parent works. And I can assure you it won't work. But you can contact almost every single parent, and you need to try that. And there needs to be a rally point, or a point where there needs to be in place a procedure where the adults know this student goes to this adult, or possibly this adult, and that all has to be taken care of. With custody issues, child custody issues can exacerbate things a little bit, but the administrators need to make it their business to know about those things and know how to handle them correctly, and need to feel like they should ask, they should make sure every single time, and making sure shouldn't annoy a parent, it should comfort a parent.
Absolutely. I appreciate that last sentiment, because I feel like a lot of parents come in, they're feeling busy. There's almost that, what, you don't recognize me feeling, but them being certain to keep my kids safe is something I should be thanking people for.
Yes, absolutely.
And again, it gets back to volunteering and being involved. If you're volunteering and you're there every day, you're there twice a week, they do get to know you. And you don't have to flash the ID every time, because they know exactly which child you belong to.
Yes, and I believe it's also true, Jason, that if you hang around a school, or if you're involved as a parent, you will form a more meaningful relationship with somebody at the school. It may be your child's teacher, might not be, but there'll be someone with whom you will form a different sort of a relationship than a just passing relationship with everybody else. It always happens. And I'm convinced that if you just do everything you can to spend wanted time there, don't go around when you're not wanted, but when they need help, when they need volunteers, when they need suggestions, and when they do polls and questionnaires and those kinds of things, participate, because you're going to learn a lot about your school by doing that.
Great advice. I really appreciate it. I guess one other question I have about communication, this widespread communication, is a lot of the information that schools are broadcasting out that's becoming more and more on social media. And I don't know if you have a lot of experience with that, but social media can be an enormous security breach if you're not careful. Is there any experience you have, any information you have about how we can help our schools not accidentally endanger our children on the web?
Well, I remember, I've had parents say, well, you need to shut down the internet. Well, maybe not. the entire world might collapse if I had the power to shut down the internet.
Right.
But but you can often manage a student's access to the internet. Uh, with smartphones nowadays, that's even more difficult than it was before. But but parents and students are told, if you put something on the internet, it never goes.
One of our other guests, Kat Code, is she's a consultant on that very thing, and she uses the term binary tattoo. That
Yeah.
don't put anything on the
Good.
web you wouldn't tattoo on your shoulder.
Yeah, that's right. It can be very troublesome, and it can be very dangerous, especially I think with the elementary school students, um, because of the danger involved. Now with older students, high school, let's say high school students, there are any number of ways they can get in trouble that exceed even the ways they could get in trouble when they were in primary or elementary school. But they are a little older. They're soon to be adults. But the school needs to know, what is the social media platform that where are they helping each other with their homework and doing those kinds of things? It's someplace. It might be on Facebook. I've even heard about it being on a certain blog. I don't understand exactly how that could have happened, but I've heard about those kinds of things. And administrators and teachers need to be aware of that. Students will tell you.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your experience and wisdom with everybody. Before we go, I would like to ask, is there anything else you really wish parents or administrators knew about school safety, about keeping their kids safe, that you haven't had a chance to say, or you haven't said enough over your career, or you've said plenty of times, but nobody listened?
Well, I think schools will never be completely safe because we're not going to make them completely safe. We could, but we're not going to. Fort Knox is a pretty safe place because we've decided that it ought to be. And I think that school districts and states and those who have the ability to do so ought to really think seriously about the amount of money that it's going to cost and the effort that it will entail to make schools safer. Bus drivers have a profoundly important job, in my opinion, and I just don't believe they're paid well enough. And they have sometimes 30 or so students on their bus at a time, and they have to pick them all up and get them all home. And a lot goes on those buses. And is there a monitor on the bus with the driver? See, those kinds of things. Food and things are delivered to schools every single day. Who is being paid to make sure that the person who brings in the food for the lunch is the person who ought to be bringing in the food for the lunch? So there are a number of things that could be done, but aren't going to be done because we haven't made an appropriate financial investment into it. So that's the one thing I think that ought to be looked into. People say schools can never be safe. Yes, they can, but they're not going to be because there are lots of things in all over the world that are completely safe. No one will ever have a go at them because they're so important to us. well, what could be more important to us than our children, our next generation, the group of folks who are going to care for us when everyone is as old as I am? That has always been a little bit troublesome to me.
Well, it's what's the word? It's been kind of common knowledge that you can tell what a society prioritizes by what they choose to spend their money on. And that's kind of a sad statement about our priorities, the way funding goes into education and where education funding ends up being spent.
Yeah. And, the question, people say, you cannot stop a determined person who wants to destroy lives and things like that. Well, yes, you can. It's done all over the world, but it's not done at schools. And I think there ought to be dangerous, but
Thanks for watching today. I hope you found something useful or at least entertaining. If you did love what you saw, there's a lot of ways that you can support us on Patreon, on Facebook, simply by liking or subscribing below, or by following the links you see right now to the other videos on our channel. Thank you again for everything you do to keep us moving.